and enough as a person, because we say charity begins at home, and that is in a family, and we expect a family to have a mother, a father, and the children. But there is a bitter taste that this leaves to us when we talk about a fatherless generation. And when we talk about this, I know so many of you right now are flinching and frowning and thinking, running back to the past that was not as you wished it was, and the present that you have fought so hard to make, but again from a base that does not exist. And that is where we talk about a fatherless generation. That is where we talk about your parenting goals, and that is where we are asking, how far have you gone? Because you have set the goals, but have you gone ahead to be able to act them out and put them in place and follow them through? And whenever you fall off the wagon, do you get back up? That is what we're asking ourselves, a fatherless generation, the consequences and how we turn that around. And to make this discussion happen, we have Mr. Otim. Mr. Otim is the team leader, dad base. Now that to me, so it sounds dad base. Yeah. Who thinks about that? It has to have a story to it. There must be a story behind that. But we are so honored to have you to have this conversation. I believe that this conversation is going to be a turnaround for so many people. Forgiveness, transformation is going to stream out of this, and then some of us are going to be better fathers and better parents because of it. So I would love to hear part of what the story is that gives birth to dad base, because I believe it's very crucial to this conversation. Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Hilda, for giving me this opportunity. It's such a pleasure being a part of the show. My name is Ivan Peter Otim. I'm married to Joy Nakato Otim. I usually say my first ministry is husband.
And it is. And very few men know that.
Yes. And also father to Ron Strong Otim, our 2-year-old son. And we are passionate about ministry, and we love God. And you asked about the dad base. The dad base is a men's ministry that is passionate about rescuing every boy and man from a sonship crisis or fatherlessness or dad deprivation. We envision every man being restored to God's design of sonship. And sonship to us is our eternal relationship with God the Father, but then it's also that relationship between a father and a son, or a father and his children. So
in the real world.
Yes. So our mandate in a nutshell is to break the cycle of fatherlessness. And we do that by bringing men together, bridging the gap between fathers and sons, discovering God-given identity.
How do you do that? Men in this town are big-headed.
That's right.
Big-headed.
It's
do they come through?
Men have a nature of being closed in, and in majority of communions of men, you find several conversations on money, several conversations on women, or
alcohol,
alcohol, or even just in the Christian environment. It could be ministry, it could be spiritual gifts, but then
business, money, they love that.
But then when it comes to the matters of the heart, cars, exactly.
They love talking about gadgets,
sports, a lot of conversations really that are on the surface, or just that are enticing for that moment. But then to get men to talk about the deep issues of their heart,
affecting
them, that have been probably passed on through generations, or probably that those issues they face in their secret lives is really a tough thing.
They feel like I'm not man enough if I bring my problems out for another to help me. They feel like I should be self-contained with every answer, which is not the case.
True. And yet deep down there in every man, there's a desire to actually be accepted. There's a desire to be loved. There's a desire to be listened to. So at the dad base, we try to encourage men to get to open up, that space, and say, hey, let's create a platform where we're going to accept one another and also grow in love, and know that we are all on the journey of actually getting to know God as our Father, Do
you know where else I'm thinking now that we're talking about this conversation? So many things are going to be quite spontaneous, but I feel like you need to recruit the woman in this man's life to be your ambassador, because most men will not open up to just anyone. But when they find comfort in their woman, they will open up. Even when they don't need help or advice, but they will find stripping naked before that person is an okay thing. They don't feel like this person is an outsider. So if you had brand ambassadors, wives as brand ambassadors, I believe that will run.
You're very right. And really, realistically, for us as men, or even just growing up as boys, we have a strong attachment to our mothers, you know, because
the nurturing force.
It's the nurturing force. It's where we find comfort. It's where we find, you know, understanding. Even when we mess up, it's where we experience at least love. And in so doing, even as we grow, you know, it's easy to even have women. You know,
tend to look for it still from a woman.
But unfortunately, you find that majority of boys will use that opportunity to, you know, relate and open up to women for selfish reasons. You know, in many relationships, for example, that are broken, you find that a woman would give in because of a story, a sad story that this man has sold to her, and this sad story that is going to actually cause a wounding, and it's not really from authenticity.
A real love, a real kind of with a foundation.
So in a men's conversation, in a men's setting, we encourage authenticity, you know, that yes, you bring in this journey, this story, this experience, then how are you going to recover? What can you do?
You need to bring your men. You need to bring
so the women need to as well be alerted enough to realize that, okay, yes, this man has given me this, you know, this very moving story. Experience.
What do I do with it?
What do I do with it? You know, can I challenge him to work on
better?
Something? Can I challenge him to commit to a community, to find another man to actually help him heal, or find out how they overcame such a situation?
And which also gives me an entry point. I remember when I just gotten into my husband's life, and he gave me the story of how his father was very absent. Until now, he says, I barely remember his face, but I know he would go for long, maybe a full year, never come back, and then he would come back, you know, after some time, and that is when we would have a glimpse. When you go to him for school fees, he tells you, go back to your mother, don't bother me, and yet, you know, he was working, and he had the money. So just like you say, that when your husband gives you such a story, which brings me to a generation of fatherlessness, because as my husband is giving me such a story, I have my own story of a present father, but absent in certain aspects. And so people tend to console themselves, because I remember the vivid thing that he told me was like, I never want to be like my father. I have prayed my whole life that I never move into the footsteps of my father. I loved him as a person. I saw him when I was a child, and I didn't see much of him. I don't have issues with him right now. I don't hold anything against him, but I never want to replicate or duplicate his lifestyle into my lifestyle. I want to be a totally different man from the man that he was, to the extent that he hated that he looked like his father at some point. It was like, they tell me I look like my father, and you know, some of these things, when people say, the family says, you look like your father, you're going to be like your father. And so when he had that, he took it upon himself to pray, just like you mentioned at some point, cutting away the ancestral, you know, following blood and stuff like that. He was like, yes, I look like him, but I'm never going to be like him. And true to his word, he has tried every step of the way to be a totally different man, to be a better man. And that's where my question comes from today. The fatherless generation that we talk about, that the whole world talks about. It's not just Uganda. It's not a Ugandan issue. It's not a continental issue. It's a global crisis that we are facing. Where does this come from? What are the choices that they made that brought us to where we are, that we are replicating and duplicating that same, and creating more crisis along the way that we are failing to rectify? There must be a foundation to this, and until we dig that foundation and know what brought about this problem, it is a pandemic, I believe, that is worse than COVID, because if it's going to wipe away generations and the moral decadence and everything that is going to come with it, then it's a heavy pandemic. Where does it come from? What are the choices that they made that brought us to where we are right now?
I think, Hilda, that's really a great question, and it's really coming to understand that we do not come from our parents, but we come through them. And that's a big statement, because we ask ourselves,
we come through them.
Yes, we come through them. Then we ask them.
They are stewards.
Yes, they're stewards, the vessels.
We are entrusted into their hands.
Exactly. Exactly. So a bigger question should be then, where do I actually really come from? And that takes us back to Genesis, you know, when God created the first family, you know, and this first family was to actually demonstrate the exact love and nature of God as our Father as well. And we see the story. We see man falling and you know, moving away from the place of love, from the place of power, of privilege, and now getting to the world. And we see the moment the man or that family, the moment Adam and Eve move away from the place of their father's heart, we see then the seed being replicated. The seed just that keeps on going on is of pain, is of anger, is of suffering, you know. So what happens that by the conditions of the world, we need to work, we need to prove ourselves, we need to show that we can actually survive, you know. And then everyone is trying to have conflict and competition and the pressure of, you know, you have to attend this before you die, you know. And we don't ask ourselves then, what is really the origin of this issue? So because the very first record of fatherlessness is actually in the Bible, you know, that Adam, you know, left the place of the father because of sin, because of, you know, not following the word of his father, you know. So we find we are now at a point where that has been a cycle for generations
that
and
has
generations.
happened for so long.
For generations and generations. And you find every other child that is born, all of us who are born, we're born with a level of sinfulness. We're born with a level of wounding, you know.
And you know, when you talk about that, it's amazing how we have all these things documented and in the Bible, and so many people, even the heathens and the Muslims, read the same Bible that we actually are reading. But now that you talk about that, I can clearly see, which I have never seen, that there are so many things that are indicated in that passage to show that at some point there was a lack of responsibility.
Yes.
You know, when he says, it's the woman that you gave me, he's saying, I'm not taking responsibility for anything that is happening here. You're the one that gave me this woman. So the fathers moving away from a place of responsibility and owning up their position.
And do you realize that actually when the woman actually ate the fruit, nothing happened until the man ate the fruit, you know? So the man is the one whom God gave the word, and he was going to pass on the instruction even to his seed, even to his children, you know. So you find that even when they left, there's a wounding that is created and it's passed on. And that wounding is the absence of a father's love, you know, in the first place. So that wounding today, it can actually be demonstrated or just manifested because, you know, when the father is absent spiritually, you know, when the father is absent emotionally, physically at a home, or even financially. And you see, you can have a father who is present at home spiritually. You know, he's a man of God, he's a pastor. But then he's absent emotionally.
Emotionally, you know? Absent financially.
Absent financially, you know. Or you can have one who is really present financially. Whatever.
And then they will think, this is what most men, the response they will give. I am here. What more do you want?
What more
I came back home.
Exactly.
And I better than other men who don't go back to their homes. So so to speak, they feel they are doing you a favor to come back home. And even when you hint on the children, I have seen men that have said, you're using children as a scapegoat.
Exactly.
You know, they're thinking you're jealousy. So you're using, because when you say, children no longer see you, they cannot bond with you. Do they even understand you're their father? And you're like, I'm giving them money. They're going to school. They are eating. They have a shelter over their head. And these things, just like you said, it's a stretch of things that a father must be able to provide. Today we're not talking about a mother, so we're not going to include you mothers. We're going to give you a special day, your special women. So there are stretch of things that they must provide. If it's the spiritual, if it's the financial, if it's the, you know, the intellectual, you know, the emotional. So you realize that you can provide all the five, but if the sixth is missing, there's still a dent, and that dent is going to be evident. That the emotional support, even when you're providing financially, and then you are a spiritual person and you pray in tongues and you roll on the ground and get slain and do all those things, you realize that without the emotional, you are bringing up a monster that is going to torture the world even further. So when you talk about moving away from a place of a father and being able to deny the responsibility or being able to start the cycle, I clearly understand where that is coming from. But from all those things, what else do we see men, or have we seen men? Because we can say the generations behind, because these generations started then, that these things have been brought forward. But they started back then. What other traits do we see these, I will call them these guys doing that have brought us to this place of hopelessness.
Yeah.
I believe it's a lot of hopelessness that is wrecking our world right now, that you and I are rising to the purpose of saying that we can do something about it.
Yeah.
And we can be able to catch ourselves in the moment. We can be able to be more intentional about this. We can be able to hold these conversations and be able to create more awareness and say, okay, if you had not thought about this, that you're providing financially and you are there physically, but the emotional support is lacking, then there's a problem as well.
Yeah. So really the interesting thing is that there's no such thing as a perfect father, first of all. And, you know, there's also no school of fatherhood.
Exactly.
And I personally believe that there's a thin line between parenting and fatherhood, you know, because parenting is actually providing every need and resource and environment for a child to actually, you know, be nurtured well. It's like providing schooling, providing food, providing shelter,
a home,
you know, providing a home, all these needs, you know. Whereas fatherhood focuses on the bond. It focuses on the intentionality of relating with this child, relating, you know, with your son or your daughter as well. So the things that many men are actually, many fathers are abandoning is on how then can I utilize the template of God the Father has, you know, in my opportunity as well to, you know, to raise this person, you know. So it's more of then, if you do not deliberately, you know, seek to father like God the Father, then things are going to happen by default, you know. And in many cases, we father the way we know, you know. And the way you were fathered, you're going to think that it's the same way you can apply to your children as well.
And that's the issue.
If it is a disciplining, if your father probably used to discipline you by, you know, beating you up and kicking you, you think that's the best way for your child to understand.
With the umoja, sando, so you will look for a sando every time a problem
you won't think
happens.
Talking to a child is actually going to work.
So we are reproducing what we saw.
Exactly.
We are doing what we, without even thinking. We are not being intentional, because being intentional is choosing that, yes, this is what I saw happen, but this is the right thing. So I'm going to choose the right thing over what happened. But now we are saying, and I think I've said this so many times, especially when people of two different religions have come to me and they want to get married. And most of the times is either the man that is a Muslim, the woman is a Christian. And then I'm like, okay, we have to think way ahead. We don't just have to think about today and the butterflies that you're feeling in your belly, and you know, the kisses, the flying kisses that you're giving yourselves, and the adrenaline that is rising, and the oxytocin that you feel, and the bond that you feel, that 5 years down the road you're going to have a child, and 5 years down the road both of you are going to go on a growth journey. It's very possible that one of you will grow leaning more into their religion, and you will feel like you're being torn apart from this person. And that is where we've seen so many issues where people, you know, where the men says, and this is what the women have told me, no, this man, he has masters, he has a PhD, clearly he's exposed, he has he's well traveled, so he knows what he is doing. He's saying he wants monogamy, and he just wants one woman. And so most of the times it ends up that these gentlemen end up, after getting a first child, a second child, maybe his financial, you know, muscle has increased, he goes on to get other women. The same woman runs for help. It's like, oh, didn't you see this when you were starting? But he promised. He's well traveled. He's well schooled, and so he didn't want to get in. He didn't want to get into that. And on asking these gentlemen, sometimes I find out that it's not because that's what they wanted, but they saw it happening. They grew up in a polygamous family, and so for them, that is the standard of manhood. And so they promised when they didn't have enough finances, when they were not stable enough. But when stability kicked in, they had to go back to the drawing board and do exactly what they saw, not what they think is right. So what you say that people do what they saw until they know better, or until they choose better, they will always do what they know. And that is a baseline for so many fathers that have gone haywire, that have practiced fatherlessness for so long, because they saw it in their own. Like, when you are too present and focused on your family, then you are weak as a man. I don't know whether you've had those statements.
And you see, the absence of a father is actually the root of all these other social problems we see in the communities, you know. And there's some statistics I love sharing from Family Life Network Uganda. In 2018, they did a research, and they found only 5% of fathers were actively involved in the lives of their children, meaning fully involved, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially or
5%.
socially, 5%. And then 10%,
That's a pathetic
we're not even aware of the children that father themselves.
Wow.
Meaning he can spread his seed wherever he travels.
Everywhere,
you know?
yeah.
And 30% of households were led by women. You know, so you find if a father has not gotten enlightenment, there's a friend of mine who says that you're not ready to be a father yet if you're not willing to be a son. You know,
yeah.
If he doesn't get the enlightenment of what does it mean to first of all submit to my father, to love my father, to build the foundation on my father, you know, and build on that. And so you find, like some of us, my personal story was, I never really wanted to be like my father. But then each time I said I will never be like my father, it was out of pain. It wasn't because I've gotten enlightened, but because I watched how he was behaving at home, and I said, this is not how I should behave. Yeah. But before I realized, I was actually on the same path, just like him.
Yes.
And it was a default setting. Until now.
So it's not about words.
Yes. Until now, I came to an opportunity of actually interacting and having a new relationship with adoptive fathers, my adoptive fathers, who held my hand and said, this is how you behave as a man. This is what it means for you to, you know, to thrive. This is what it means for you to have your identity in Jesus.
So that exposed you to a different reality.
So you find that there is a whole, you know, cycle that needs to be broken from this person, and then also the understanding that whatever happened between you and your father wasn't even your fault, or even your father's fault, but it was just part of the cycle as well. Because the danger is when a father, you know, is motivated by not repeating what his father did to him with his children, and yet really not considering the fact that he needs to be rooted in a place of sufficiency and his strong foundation. Because the world is tough, you know, and you're going to find yourself doing things by default again. Exactly. So it's a question on then, where do I get to learn these things? So the quickest opportunity is finding community.
Yes.
You know?
Where do I plug in?
Exactly.
Where do I get constant reminders?
Finding community. And when Jesus came to restore us back to the place of the love of the Father, and to show us that we still have an opportunity to be restored back, you know. And as we say, he's the distance between us and God the Father, you know. So in a sense, the more we love Jesus as fathers, as men, you know, the more we love also our families and children, and just bring on the design of fatherhood the way the Father loves us. That we shall love our children unconditionally. We shall have mercy on them. We shall have grace on them, you know. And that whatever they learn from us, they'll also now reflect what is in the kingdom of God, you know. So if we can have men plugged into the community and say,
learn.
And say, yes, I don't know how to, you know, say I love you to my children. I've never had any man say that to me. Yeah. Then how does Michael do it? You know, how does Michael actually play with his children? Yeah. How does he even forgive his children?
Show emotions.
Yes. How does he discipline? So it's important to realize that being a father is not a rival. You know, it is the beginning of
learning, of a lifelong learning journey.
Yes, you have received a baby, but then you have also been born into fatherhood.
Exactly.
Know? So you're also a baby in a sense of
so don't believe like you don't behave like you're the macho man. You're strong and you know it all. It's all figured out. Be soft enough to know that this is something that has been entrusted, and if men can do that, if fathers can know that, I think that would be. But I think we will talk about that later. I want us to talk about influence.
Yes.
Because so many fathers, definitely their families have influenced them, but even when they skip the influence of their families, you realize there is another hurdle of fellow men influencing them. And fellow men definitely will, sometimes they will influence who you marry, they will influence what kind of family you have, they will influence how you run your family, they will influence. So if the circle that you have, I was speaking to people last Friday at Hold My Hand, and I was telling them that the circle of the people that is closest to you is a prophetic picture of who you will be in the future. So if you surround yourself with losers, that means in a way you are planning to be like them, because you are not going to be strong enough to pull them to your light side. They are going to be they are going to outweigh you and pull you to the wrong side, because you're rubbing the shoulders with them all the time. So I've seen even fathers in communities and running to wrong figures for advice, and because the other one seems to be a macho man and to be arrogant, so everyone respects them, and so they go and learn from them, and they're influenced into wrong things. Have you seen that happen?
Yes, it definitely happens everywhere, because we are relational beings, you know, and so if we some of have to relate in any way, you know. But then when it comes to influence for men, we have a model we call a discipleship strategy that is on relationship based on Paul, Timothy, and Barnabas, you know. Now, Paul in the Bible had Barnabas as his closest friend, you know. He's the one who went through, you know, experiences with him, maybe the tough times with him, maybe the times of love, times of testing, prison, and all the things. Now, every man needs a Paul or a Barnabas in his life, to hold their hand and say, hey, I'm also in this very deep issue, you know, and this is what I'm trying to do. Let's work on it together, you know. So you hold each other's hand and you're accountable to that man. Now, another man that is very important is a Timothy, you know. Now, a Timothy needs a Paul in their lives, you know, because this Paul is like a template for his behavior. In the Bible, Paul tells Timothy that let no one look down on you because you're young, but set an example to other believers, you know. So in a sense, originally, our Timothys would have been our sons at home, you know, our children at home.
Who are emulating you,
who are emulating
looking up to you as you look up to your father.
And so at some point, even though you're not yet a father, you know, there's some Timothys that are going to look at you, you know, and are going to desire to be where you are. And then also for Paul, there's going to be a time where again, you have to now pour out and invest your life into another man, you know, and where this you hold on to his hand and say, hey, you are going to become the person God created you to be. In 2 Timothy 2:2, the verse says that the things that you've watched me do, you know, before several witnesses, entrust to other men as well, who are going to pass on to others as well. So you realize that the discipleship is so important.
It's solid,
in building influence. And it's exactly what Jesus desired for us. That us being saved is not enough, but then us being saved and encouraged to carry on the Great Commission, you know, would enable more, would just help people realize the love of the Father and restore now to the original design and bringing harmony to families, peace in our families, love in our families, and just the joy of the Lord as well. So yeah.
When you talk about the original idea, I feel like we are like a prototype of some sorts, and you know, we have been. But again, that's exactly what happens. There is the authenticity and the original identity that we're supposed to own, and so many of us have deviated from that. Especially talking about father figures, have deviated from that for so many reasons. Can be influence, can be the family where you grew up from, who nurtured you, and how they nurtured you, and the things that you saw while you were growing up, coming to personal choices and the things that you have decided. I want you to hold on to that thought of personal choice, because when we come back, I want us to be able to dive into it a little bit more before we talk about the consequences the fatherless generation has had to impact or to even display in this generation. And that is where we want to be able to root out some of the solutions that we would love to share with you, and would love you to fall in on our social media platforms. Share what you feel. If you've gone through fatherlessness, if you are the father that has been absent and you want to come back and you want to plug back into your family and be able to do the right thing, share with us. We'd love to hear from you and would love to move this journey with you. Don't go. Yes, hi amazing people. We're making this August an outstanding, audacious August, and I hope that you can come stand out together with us this August. Yes,
I am telling you, it's gonna be marvelous. It's gonna be powerful, because this time you show up, you speak out,
and then you stand out.
Exactly. So come, show up this time. 4th August?
Yes, 4th of August, and we're starting at 4 p.m. It's going to start with roundtables, Beyond Success, and then we're going to dive into a very great panel, how different people stood out in business, in their calling, in their purpose, diversifying their income. So we're waiting for you on the 4th of August, Tobani Center, second level or second floor. Make sure that you are there by 4 p.m. and let's transform our lives together.
Remember, it's free of charge, both
men and women. Yes.
You don't get the life that you deserve, but that which you decide. It's time for you to decide to dominate your life. You don't do that by just having passion, you need a plan. Let's show you how you grow practically in character, competence, and in other areas of life. Welcome back to Bahati.
A fatherless generation does not mean that the fathers are actually all away Okay, so to say, fatherless generation can literally mean that the father, yes, has actually passed on. And then for some cases, and most cases that are really painful, because the emotional pain of having your father, you know, gone, that is sometimes bearable to know that, okay, he's just not absent, or he's not just minding his business while our family is going on, but he indeed passed on. Now, there is this bit of you being in a family and you know that you stay with your father, but again, you never see your father. Now, some of the people that, some of you that we're talking or having this conversation with are actually adults, but again, you feel the pain of fatherlessness because this has happened in your life, and the temptation of you carrying the same template onto your marriages and into your children's lives is actually a very high possibility, carrying more than 87% of a possibility of you living the life that you have lived before, if you're not intentional to plug in, like Mr. or Tim actually shared with us. So you see, I usually tell people that it's actually more dangerous to be available but absent than to decide and say, I have packed my bags and gone. Because then we get used to you not being around. And then we're like, we must fend for ourselves. But if you keep coming and going, when a child gets attached a bit, then you disappear. You're breaking their heart. You come back and they jubilate, daddy is back. And, you know, they feel like, you know, everything is okay. Just when they're starting to get to feel the warmth and the tenderness of having a father in their lives, you shatter their heart again. So that on and off creates a very bad dent in their lives than you just vanishing in the thin air and saying, you know what, this is, you know, to hell with this, let me just go and mind my own business. Do you talk about these things in your forums?
We definitely do. And it's really what would birth a serious identity crisis as well. You know, because you find that a father wants to be, not that he wants really, but then he believes, if I provide food, if I pay school fees, that is okay, that's enough. What more, you know? And of course, we also, men have other engagements as well, you know? But then there is a bond that as well needs to be nurtured, a bond that needs to be, that needs to grow as well between the children.
And there's an age past which that bond cannot grow.
Exactly.
You can try, but you'll be writing on water.
Exactly. So
I think these children need the fathers more when they are growing and just getting to make a sense of the world and to see the world through your eyes and for you to introduce them certain aspects of lives. They feel more bonded to you, because when you ask most of the men, what do you remember most about your father? They'll remember riding a bicycle while they were a child. They'll remember eating ice cream somewhere. They'll remember the memories that stick more are the memories when they are children, not the memories when they're adults. Because
for example, they'll not remember, you know, how you used to work so hard in your office.
No, they will never do.
They may probably remember the times when they waited and they were not seeing you. And maybe it just kept on as a cycle. But they knew that, yes, there was always food, there was always this, but then I never used to see him in the first sense. So it really calls for intentionality. And earlier on we talked about, you know, setting the foundation, right? You know, but you see, the thing really with a father absence is the effect is a father wound. And this father wound can really be, can also be a result of, say, abuse, you know, where there's some level of absence, you know, of love or withholding of love because, you know, there's some abuse, either emotional or physical or even verbal, you know.
But the worst is the emotional bit of it.
Exactly, you know. So the abuse is something that can even affect, say for example, if it's between the marriage, in a marriage, it definitely affects the children as well, you know. And even as everything else is being provided for, you know, in some situations when nothing actually is there, the child grows up actually with that pain as well, with that wounding as well, and it's directly passed on, you know. The other thing is just the actual absence, and this absence, as you mentioned, it could be because of death, you know, that one of the parents, you know, passed on. And another situation is when the parents actually divorced, you know, and the child has to make a choice on whom do I go and live with, you know. So that as well causes a deep one, and it's a deep consequence as well, you know, that a child will think of, okay, maybe I'm the reason why my parents have been separated. You know, had I not been in the picture, maybe, you know, they would have moved on in their lives. And, you know, the other thing is addictions, you know, that
loved substances more than they loved their family.
So you get to feel that if I spend more time drinking, you know, I'll get relieved of my own issues, you know, and you don't really place the picture of I'm actually withholding time, you know, from my children, from my family as well. So these addictions are actually things that can really empty you of the desire to actually spend more time and be intentional in building a relationship or even just raising your children.
And that is why I wanted us to talk about personal choices.
Yes.
Because sometimes, yes, we can blame the long arm of our history and the things that have happened to us as in the present moment, that being the reason as to why we are doing what we are doing. But again, there are things that fathers have done that you necessarily can't trace back to what was done to them, but they have decided and said they're going to be womanizers. You know, go with every woman that comes. They have decided they are going to be addicted. You know, sometimes it begins as a choice. When definitely it progresses, you need a lot more help because then you can't bring yourself back. You need people to intervene and help you. But while you made the choice to wash away your sorrows, while galloping that bottle, you never thought that you were stealing time, like you said, I mean, from your family. So you make a choice to bypass your from work. You go through, there are people who even have their homes are closer than their drinking places, so they bypass their homes, go to a drinking place, and then they are able to do whatever they need to do, come back stumbling past midnight, and some of the horrors and words that most people have actually had to stomach when the mother tells you, I don't think your father is coming anymore, please go and sleep. While the children are waiting to see their father come home, their hearts are shattered. And most of the people that have very bad stories, they do not have bad stories linking them to the death of their father. Yes, they talk about it painfully. They don't have bad stories linking to that total movement of their father and walking out of their home. Yes, they feel pain and to a certain extent they blame their fathers, but to the greatest extent, if you feel the worst pain that people talk about, that they link to their fathers, is fathers that didn't do the right things even when they were in their lives. Now that is wrong, because then a father becomes like a perpetual thorn in the flesh of a child, because they are busy insulting, maybe beating up their mothers, maybe womanizing but still basing at home, maybe getting into addictions but still basing at home. So the child is seeing all that, and the trauma that is born out of that runs deeper than one who has lost their dad. Than one whose father totally decided to pack up and go. So even when we are saying, I'm coming back home, I'm around, I'm providing, you have a shelter over your head. You are providing a shelter, but the shelter that has thorns and is pricking people's lives day in, day out, and you're not seeing that. And you're thinking, I am raising a family. And then we wait at the end of our lives as parents and as fathers to have someone give you a glass of water on your sickbed. And the child says, I will send a maid. I have much better things to do. So right now, the seeds that you sowed, you are reaping. And then you want to send curses. If I was not your father, if I didn't take care of you and give you school fees, thank you very much, you gave them the school fees. But you gave them the school fees with insults, you gave them the school fees with trauma, you gave them the school fees with everything that is pricking them, and that took away the relationship that you had with this person. So do you think choices, I don't know, how do we, because then they're bringing us to the consequences that we are seeing right now, and the reason as to why it's very painful for us is because we think they did it intentionally. They saw what they were doing, they knew it was wrong, but they did it anyway.
There are two phases of choices. The first phase is really the choices that the father makes, you know, that definitely affect the children. Could be withholding love, or what we actually talked about.
Those subtle choices.
Addiction and things like that. And where he thinks that, well, maybe the responsibilities with the mother, you know. And later on, as you said, you know, they have to reap what they actually sowed later on. And then the other side of the choices is on the child, you know, where, say, when you become an adult now, you know, and you're now looking at maybe how you're affected by the choices of your father, it's also your choice to think about how then do I respond to what happened, you know.
Exactly.
And in many cases, as you mentioned, because of the wounding, actually, to know that you're still struggling and wounded is when you actually still resent when you're not able to express your love. And exactly, you know. So you find that if you go back and say, you know what, I cannot actually forgive him.
I don't want to see him again.
I don't want to see him again.
But I forgave him.
Exactly.
You've not forgiven.
You've not forgiven, you know. So it's like you'll also abandon that relationship, but then you're going to be in a position where you actually also have to nurture that relationship with your own children.
Yes.
So before you realize it, you're actually going to find that cropping up and spiritually even attaching yourself to it as well.
You're copying and pasting.
Exactly. So the choices that have to be made, for a father, it has to be on how then do I father in a different way. As we mentioned earlier on, how then do I, how can I learn how to be present, you know? And that is tough because the children are not going to teach you that, you know? It's not even going to be your previous father, for example, but then it can be your previous father, your father.
Even the absent father,
yes,
can teach you certain things.
So your absent father is going to either teach you how to be a great father, or just keep on in the cycle as well, you know? So again, the choices, deliberate choices. With my own experience, I came to a point when my father was absent, where I asked myself, you know, had my father been present, you know, had he understood, had truth been passed on to him, had the knowledge and the wisdom of raising me into a great man, had he bared that truth, you know, then, you know, today my life would be different.
Totally different.
I probably, you know, my purpose would be different as well, you know. But then all that happened so that I would recognize, you know, that my father, God the Father, is always there for me, you know. So as I mentioned earlier on, that come to that point of realization that you do not come from your parents, you know, but they're vessels. So you come to understand the choice the child now has to make is on how then do I actually cut myself off, you know. And we usually say that, I mean, first as Christians, when you come into relationship with Jesus, now what happens in that moment is that our generational, you know, our point of reference, our generational point of reference is broken, and it's now directly connected to God the Father. No longer from our fathers, no longer from the alcohol, you know, genes and all these generational issue cycles that happen in our families, polygamy and all, but now our design is now restored, and we ask ourselves then, how do we express love in our family?
So that means our expectations of you are also elevated.
Yes, are also elevated.
Yeah, elevated, because then we think you are going to be very sober, very alert.
Yes.
You're going to be willful and deliberate about the choices that you make going forward. It does not mean that you're going to be perfect, but you're going to be trying. Every other time you fall off the wagon, you'll find yourself up because you know what the right thing
and that is really hard when you're alone, Hilda, because you can't learn that by just being
That's why we need men holding other men's lives.
That's why we need community.
In this, we need community.
We need authenticity in relationships of men. You know, where we don't
to be vulnerable.
Exactly, we're vulnerable. We express love to one another. I remember I used to get offended when my brothers used to say, "I love you, Peter." And I used to reserve that statement for only women. And now this brother is saying, "I love you," because I'd never had any man.
Because you don't know how to receive love.
Yes, and the men also can never say that to a fellow man. You know, "I love you, brother." Of course, we live in an age where perversion is so extreme, and people think otherwise. But then when you share similar values and rooted in this, you know, as a Christian, as a son of God, you get to learn that the love that you give, you know.
And it's healing. It's nurturing.
Exactly.
You know, you'll find that the person that God places in your journey to extend this healing is maybe not your actual father, but there's another manly figure that extends this love, and you tend to receive it sheepishly without you wanting to receive it, but they're like, you know what, you have to take it anyway. And I love it when people do that. But crossing from a fatherless generation that has resulted into so many things that we currently see, the perversion that you've talked about. I believe it stems somewhere from fatherlessness, because fathers used to be the people that bring us to a place of accountability, that bring us to a place of this is who we are as a family. When you carry, for example, the Sabiti name, you carry it with a lot of enthusiasm, with a lot of love, and then you can even attribute certain things to it and say, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. And I believe that got lost somewhere along the way. There is a generation that practiced that, and they were very authentic with that. But right now, we see a lot of perversion coming. We see a lot of crime coming in. We see a lot. There's so many things what have you seen that has sprouted up because of this lack of fatherless, because of the fatherlessness?
I really believe that every generation from creation, every generation has had its own different effect of fatherlessness. You know, the way our fathers experience fatherlessness is different from how our generation is, you know, and also different from the previous. For them, our fathers, for example, maybe for them, all their fathers really were concerned about is food there, you know, not really on, you know, expression of love and all things, you know. And the more times change, you know, the more we need to actually understand deeper our
things have
foundation.
evolved.
Yes. And for me, I really believe that the number one problem is on identity crisis, you know, where today we're trying to identify with different things. Could be gender, it could be career, it could be a relationship, it could be. So that identity crisis is really where the issue really comes from. And if you sense it, if you really think about it, the identity formation definitely starts from home. It starts from our father affirming his children. Yes. It starts from, I mean, that them seeing that there's a relationship between my mother and father that is actually thriving, you know, and also desiring.
I belong here.
Yeah, I belong here. And not everyone has had that privilege, you know, of having both parents and expressing that love. But we've had people in our communities. We have mentors. We have people in our churches, you know, who can actually adopt us and even be the ones we can learn from. So the identity crisis is so deep. It reminds me of Matthew 3 when Jesus was just being launched out to his ministry, you know. Jesus was at a place where he was just starting. He was 30 years old, but he was just getting activated. And we see when he was being baptized in verse 17, a voice comes from the Father and says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." So his identity is set straight there and then.
He's a beloved Son.
And in the next chapter, he goes into...
There's acceptance.
Yes, he's a beloved Son.
There's inclusion.
Exactly. In whom I'm well pleased. So Hilda, imagine if every child, if every human being...
had those words.
You know,
I'm delighted
that this
in
is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. You
Yeah.
know. So if we lack that, if we're deprived of those words, of that affirmation, it means we're going to try to search for that in different places.
Everything
you know, from everything. We'll think, yes, when I get influence as a leader and become a politician and have all this authority, I'll be good. You know, because
if I have multiple women,
if I have multiple women, then I'll be happy. If I have more children, then I'll be happy. If I have more
cars,
money, more cars, you get. So, and yet that is not satisfying. You know,
it's like a bandage, and we're bandaging a rotting wound.
Exactly. Wow. So I really believe that if our generation today, and you know, even how the issue of fatherlessness has evolved and how it's affecting us today, if we can have more community where we talk about our identity, our foundation, and realize that
solidify it, form it.
Yeah, because I mean, our foundation, sustainer, and our source. If we are to ask ourselves, then how do we get our roots so firm, you know, in our foundation, and then how do we draw more people to that foundation as well?
Because that makes you a better father. It makes you a better husband. It makes you a better work colleague. It literally makes you a better work person. If your identity is solid, if your identity is unshakable, and if you're fully aware of your identity. But just like you said, we are blindly searching, and everything we touch, we think this is it, until it's no longer working. You have all the money, but you're not happy.
Exactly. And you find there's so many platforms that encourage men to be men, you know. A man, you need to, this is how you invest, this is how you make money, this is how you do the things, which are really amazing. But that's not really the standard of being a man. First, we believe that the only standard of being a man is Jesus Christ. Jesus is the standard of masculinity. So then if a man is to deeply relate and deeply desire to be just like Jesus, that means that he will love even his marriage just the way Jesus loves his church, you know. It means that he will learn to father the way the Father fathers him as well, you know. So if our motivation comes from, hey, can we challenge ourselves to be like this man Jesus, better, you know? Can we challenge ourselves to, you know, to share the infectious love of Jesus?
Because then I feel everything will fall in place.
Exactly. Everything else will fall in place, you know. Because Jesus desires us not only to be in relationship with him actually, but then for us to actually also get to a place of the Father's heart, you know, to be sufficient in our foundation and knowing that, yes, Jesus is actually like the bridge, and he came to actually pay that cost so that we may be restored back. So if our generation today is struggling with deep wounds, and if we're to minister healing, then we need to have a discussion on identity, you know. What is our identity? Where
the identity is the foundation, which is so bad, because again, when you talk about identity, very few people understand it.
Yeah.
You know, you can point at something, for example, when you point at crime, the reason as to why that is happening is still lack of identity.
Yes.
The background and the canvas is lack of identity. If you talk about poverty, and the poverty-stricken homes that are fatherless, you still go back to identity.
Yes.
That someone has not known who they are and what they ought to do and the authenticity of that, and be able to grow from that place to be able to be the best versions of themselves in other areas of their of their lives. Yes, it won't get lost. My call to fathers would be for the good fathers to stop whispering, to take their positions and start speaking up.
Yeah.
Because we've had evil speak loudly for so long. We've had crime, we've had all the consequences of the fatherless generation. They have spoken so loud for so long that, you know, we have bomb blasters, you know, we have narcissistic and toxic, you know, people in the world. We have the armed robbers and all that. When you look at it, there is somewhere that it is coming from. All those things are speaking loud. We are seeing them on news. That is why news these days has become depressing and very stressful, because there's nothing hopeful that anyone is communicating. We're either talking about tornadoes, hurricanes, we're talking about Ukraine and Russia that is fighting, and you can see clearly by the time you wage a battle, you are not content in who you are and your identity, and there's just something lacking. That is why you're not in for the peace talks, but all you want is to, you know, let the planet vanish and kill everybody so that you can thrive. All the thuggery and, you know, the political kind of bad political ambitions. So I'm thinking if the men, the proper men, the good fathers can stop whispering and just stop at, okay, you're doing it in your family. Can you reach out? Just like you've said, can you reach out to other men? Can you speak even when they're not hearing? After they've had you for a long time, maybe they will say, no, I think it's time. I really need to plug in. But if you talk about the consistency with which the good men are doing this job, should go to another level instead of doing it and saying, but men are not forthcoming. That is who I was. I was like, but men are not forthcoming. I'm like, no, then I'm not going to deal with men. Until I told my husband that, you know what, I think something needs to be done about men in this town. And I believe that's the solution. If we all come up, if we all are passionate about this, we can be able to change. And the women, we need you in this fight. The ladies, we need you in this fight because you're holding the gentleman's word. What would you love to give us as your last remark?
Yes, as my last remarks, really, I want to encourage men really to embrace the opportunity to be discipled, you know, to really engage in the opportunity of working with other men in accountability, you know. Our lives, you know, thrive in a relationship, in discipleship, you know. Community, we all need community. So my encouragement is if we can be vulnerable and accountable, you know, where we allow another man to hold our hands, or we allow ourselves as well to open up to other fellow men, or even just get the courage to work with another man, I think we'll have a better society. Yes,
that's a beautiful one. So a vulnerable man is a sexy man, and he's a good father, he's a good husband. We need men that are men, not the macho kind of induced, like you've taken steroids and you feel you are Van Damme of this world. No, come back to the earth, be centered and be solid and be good. Laugh, you know, look nice, and you know, let's thrive and let's flourish. We love you. Fall in, tell us what's happening your end. We'd love to hear that, and we can always answer any questions that you have. I always find pleasure in having such discussions and conversation that are actually life-changing and transformational. And for me, when we talk about fatherhood, before we talk about politics, before we talk about Russia and Ukraine fighting, before we talk about anything else, we have to talk about the essence of the family. And that is what we just did with Mr. Otim, and broken it down from where it comes from, what consequences, and then how we can be able to turn around. And I hope that as we mentioned the turnaround, plugging into a community, community, and being able to be vulnerable as a man, and knowing that you have to make better choices for your family and for your country and for the world as a whole. I believe that you've had great takeaways, things that you are going to act out in your life that are also going to set precedents for the next generations to flourish and thrive and make better decisions. So thank you so much to the crew. Oh my God, I have a big crew, a big team that I cannot mention each one's name, but thank you so much. They do a wonderful job doing what we do and bringing this transformation. I couldn't have done it alone. Merapi, thank you so much on the clothes. If you want the best corporate wear, go to that is Bukoto Kenjoy Supermarket, right above Kenjoy Supermarket on that same building. There is Merapi corporate wear. You're going to find them. They're doing such an amazing job. So from me to you, you are the greatest people that we actually broadcast to, and we bring this transformation to. I would love to hear from you. Get onto our numbers, get into our social media platforms. Let's discuss and let the conversation go on. From me to you is a good night. Yes, hi, amazing people. We're making this August an outstanding, audacious August, and I hope that you can come stand out together with us this August. Yes,
I am telling you, it's gonna be marvelous. It's gonna be powerful, because this time you show up, you speak out,
and then you stand out.
Exactly. So come, show up this time. 4th August?
Yes, 4th of August, and we're starting at 4 p.m. It's going to start with roundtables, Beyond Success, and then we're going to dive into a very great panel, how different people stood out in business, in their calling, in their purpose, diversifying their income. So we're waiting for you on the 4th of August, Tobani Center, second level or second floor. Make sure that you are there by 4 p.m. and let's transform our lives together.
Remember, it's free of charge, both
men and women. Yes.
Thank you for watching. Bahati comes to you every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 p.m. here on Spirit TV. Bahati, bringing you knowledge, wisdom, financial and personal growth, better relationships leading to your transformation and elevation.